The Democrats are saying that it's better to offend the Muslims because they are more likely to forgive us for committing a genocide.
So that's very clear. So it seems to me that if Harris wins, Zionism wins.
The Zionists are panicking and scrambling. The reason why this power suddenly exists is precisely because the elections are so tight.
Sami, are you calling for Muslims to vote for Donald Trump in his next election?
There is a very real chance that the two-party system in America could be broken in November. You break the two-party system. Gaza breaks the two-party system. Gaza breaks the invincibility aura of Zionism. It's not about whether Jill Stein is the perfect candidate or not. We're talking about limbs being collected in garbage bags. We're talking about Biden, who has given Israel every single weapon that it has demanded. Explain to me what Trump will do that is worse. Explain to me how much further you can go than this. You walk to the ballot box, you walk over those bodies, piles and piles of those bodies.
Are Muslims in America ready to bear that pain? Are they ready to vote for their Palestinian brothers and sisters? The ongoing slaughter in Gaza and now the carpet bombing of Lebanon has as its backdrop the US elections. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have clearly stated their intentions to back Israel, and it is hard sometimes to place a cigarette paper between them. Some have sought to characterise Harris as a better candidate, suggesting she would be ready to restrain Israel, although with little evidence. And others have conceded her stance to be not too dissimilar to Biden, but the other side, Trump, could be far worse. They evoke the lesser of the two evils argument to suggest that for Muslims, holding your nose and voting for Harris is better than voting for Trump. Notwithstanding the fact that using the lesser of the two evils argument previously has caused Muslims to vote for Clinton, for Bush, for Obama, and for Biden, all of whom seem to compete with Shaytan on how much evil they would like to dispense. But the height of evilness has been the execution of this genocide, which has been on the watch of the Democrats. So how should American Muslims respond to this genocide? Should they abandon Harris? I'm planning to visit the United States very soon, inshallah, and will be meeting with American Muslim leaders and others as I attempt to piece together an answer to these very crucial questions. But to begin our conversation, I've invited back onto the show for part 2 of our conversation, Sami Hamdi, to share his thoughts on the subject. Sami, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me, Jill.
Jazakallah khair. Well, Sami, every time you come on my podcast, you seem to court controversy. So let's not make this... Let's make this a similar thing. And I think it's a very, very difficult subject for very many American Muslims. And actually, I've been in conversation with lots of American Muslims who are actually genuinely, they genuinely feel that they don't have an answer to these questions. So let's try to find at least some form of answer for them today, inshallah ta'ala. Sami, we've seen a bounce for Kamala Harris in the polls, and it seems like after Biden, her nomineeship may actually clinch it, at least apparently, for the Democrats. Is that how you see what's taking place at the moment?
I think that when you look at the polls as they stand now, I think the reality is that it's neck and neck. It's been described by Nate Silver as one of the tightest elections of the past 16 years. I think that a lot of the swing states are still up for grabs, and we're hearing leaks from the Democrat Party that they themselves believe that it's on a knife edge and desperately still pouring money into the swing states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Michigan. There is rumors that perhaps the Democrats have given up on it, but the recent polls suggest there's been a slight bounce for Kamala Harris or the like. But I think that initial bounce that we saw, that saw her surge, has now dampened a bit, and now we're seeing them neck and neck with regards to between Democrats and between Donald Trump. I think that the issue of whether Kamala Harris has clinched it or not, I think that it is not the nomineeship that will decide the election, whether it's Harris or Biden. Yeah. I think it's becoming abundantly clear that Gaza is what will decide the election. Gaza is what will decide the elections. Because the elections are at such a knife edge, because it's so close, it means that the minority population, the Muslims in those areas, who just so happen to be concentrated in these swing states, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in Georgia, in Arizona, many of them in Florida as well, although Florida in recent years has not been the swing state that it once was. But as a result of the tightness of the elections, these votes certainly have an outsized impact in terms of deciding who wins in those particular states. And that's why it's not Kamala's nomineeship, it's whether these Muslims choose to punish the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration over genocide, or whether they choose to forgive the Biden-Harris genocide because they believe somehow that the other side is worse. In other words, it's whether the Muslims will deliver the Democrats to victory or whether they will. And I know some Muslims suggest that perhaps their power is being over-exaggerated. In normal times, perhaps, the Muslims would not have this influence. But it's precisely because it's so tight that the election could be decided by about 10, 20, 30,000 votes in areas with at least 100,000 Muslims. And that's the reason why when we look at these elections and how they're unfolding, particularly with regards to the Muslims, it's why Gaza is such a debate. And this is not just my analysis. Nate Silver, the pollster from the New York Times himself said that Gaza is likely to be the deciding factor in these swing states. John Hudson, the chief correspondent, White House correspondent for the Washington Post, came out himself and said that 13% of Democrat voters are thinking of abandoning the Democrats because of the Democrat support for Zionism that donors are demanding of the Democrats, meaning that Democrats have secured millions from these Zionist donors on the condition they support Zionism. But that support for Zionism is what might make them lose the elections. And here is the point, Jalal, in that what is at risk in November is not the future of Gaza or Palestine or the like. What's at risk is the future of Zionism. It is this idea that for the first time, Zionism might prove to be the political liability that loses the Democrats, the swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. In other words, for the first time in American history, it might be the support for Israel that loses a candidate at the elections. And that is a huge threat to the Zionist lobby in the US.
So let me ask you about that, because of course, as I said in my introduction, the Zionists support both sides, and both political parties, Democrats and Republicans, red and blue, are pro-Zionist parties. And as I said, you can't put a cigarette paper between them. So how is it that you're saying that if Harris loses, Zionism loses, when Donald Trump is Zionist anyway?
I think that it's easier to answer this question if you put yourself in the position of the Zionists, and we'll go through the argument. The argument that is often suggested is that Kamala and Donald Trump are both pro-Israel.
Yeah.
They are both pro-Zionist. And Kamala as well is, we know Trump is pro-Zionist, but Kamala is so pro-Zionist that even in the debate when she was told by Donald Trump that she dislikes Israelis and she doesn't like the Arabs, she said, I like the Israelis, but she didn't say anything about the Arabs.
Yes.
Both presidents are going to be pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. And that's the argument that tends to lead many Muslims to say there's no point. But the question, therefore, is why do the Israelis believe that they have to spend unprecedented amounts of money in this election? If the outcome is that both are pro-Israel, what is the threat that is making the Israelis spend 24 million unprecedented amounts of money on a primary race to unseat Jamal Bowman? What is making the Israelis, AIPAC, what is making the Zionist lobby spend so much money to topple Cory Bush? What is making AIPAC spend unprecedented levels of money on an election that is expected to produce an outcome that is supposed to be pro-Israel? What is the threat that they see in November that Muslims are failing to see? And here is the point. When Muslims began to raise their voices, when the Palestinians were recording the genocide that was taking place, Muslims responded to the call. They retweeted, they shared, they amplified, the algorithm elevated the Palestinian content, and the Palestinian content ended up reaching new corners that it wasn't able to reach before by virtue of the fact that 1.9 billion Muslims, plus those who were sympathetic to Palestinians, were starting to tweet. So the algorithm went crazy and said, this is popular, more popular than Kim Kardashian, more popular than Cristiano Ronaldo, more popular than Lionel Messi. You need to see this. When it reached the phones of Samantha, George, Jeffrey, Margaret, and the like, when they saw the Palestinian video, they were so shaken by it and so shocked by it, they also began to share it, but they also began to pay attention, including somebody called Candace Owens. Candace Owens, in the Piers Morgan interview with Rabbi Shmuley, says that before October 7th, I believed that Israel was a firm ally and friend of the US that we needed to support. And after October 7th, the Zionists in the media said they demanded, she said, they demanded that we pay attention to what's happening. And when we started paying attention, we realized we didn't like what Israel was doing. We didn't realize we didn't like what Israel has been doing. We didn't realize that we didn't like what Israel actually stands for. And now Candace Owens is asking the question, why on earth are we supporting the Israelis? Because I, as a Christian, cannot support the slaughter of babies. We saw Megan Rice enter Islam. We saw Sean King enter Islam. As a result of this da'wah, this voice spreading to all of these new corners that it couldn't spread before. As a result of that da'wah, as a result of the ordinary Muslim, as a result of those who got up and tweeted and shared and raised their voices and protested, as a result of that, Biden began to fall in the polls. When Biden began to fall in the polls, it began to cause unease and concern amongst the Democrats. Blinken, instead of ceding to that, of course, went to Tel Aviv to try to negotiate humanitarian truce in order to contain a potential rebellion that might take place in America because of the change in public opinion. Not only that, because of the ordinary Muslim encouraging people to boycott. We saw Moody's downgrade Israel. We saw AXA leave Israel. We saw Itochu, the Japanese billion-dollar company, cancel its memorandums of understanding with the Israelis. We saw Eilat port start to become declare bankruptcy and the like. Because of all this taking place, the Democrats began to feel, hang on a second, AIPAC is giving all this money, but there's a movement happening here. There's something, a change in the wind. There's a tide that is growing over here that is being fueled by the scenes that are coming out of Gaza and coming out of Palestine. And this could potentially translate into an electoral matter that needs addressing. It could affect me electorally. And what ended up happening was you had people who had voted for the Iron Dome, who voted for weapons for the Israelis, come out 6 months later in the midst of this shift in public opinion, in the midst of this wave of Gen Z and other Americans, non-Muslim Americans, now going from being pro-Israel to pro-Palestine. We saw these representatives adapt by saying, I'm going to hold the stick from the middle. Israel has the right to self-defense, but maybe we need a ceasefire. Israel has the right to self-defense, but maybe we need to support UNRWA. Israel has the right to self-defense, but maybe, and the Zionists began to ask themselves the question, what is the power they are seeing that means they no longer toe the line of our lobbying money? What is the power they are seeing that means they are no longer feel secure in the money that we're investing in them? What is the power they are seeing that is making them shake, that is making Jamal Bowman start to shake, that is making Cori Bush become flaky? What is making them shake despite the fact that AIPAC is the most powerful lobbying group? And the Zionists concluded that for all of the money they are spending, there is a concern amongst the Democrats that if they do not call for a ceasefire, if they ignore this voice, they might lose an election. Not that these people will deliver. They are worried these people might make them lose, so better to preempt it by calling for a ceasefire. The Zionists took this as a challenge to their lobbying power. So when Jamal Bowman ran for his primary, the Zionists said, we need to show the Democrats that there is no bending when it comes to Israel, that this power that you think is emerging should not be taken seriously because we are the real power. This power that you fear will punish you, you shouldn't be worried about. You need to be worried about us.
Why should we worry about them? What is it that they have in terms of track record that makes them so powerful?
The Zionists believe that in every election, everybody they've supported, they've won. And everybody who stood against them has lost. Right. Suddenly these people believe there's a power that might beat the Zionists, so I should be safe and hold the stick from the middle. That I can support the Israelis but call for a ceasefire. So the Zionist lobby spends 24 million to topple Jamal Bowman, not because they have a particular dislike to Jamal Bowman, but to tell the Democrats, even the word ceasefire, we don't tolerate it. Even anything that suggests that you are against the Israelis, we don't tolerate it. And we know you said ceasefire because of these Muslims who are moving, because of these non-Muslim Americans who are moving, because Gen Z, in the words of the ADL, the Israeli lobby, said we've lost an entire generation because you're worried Gen Z will punish you. Well, let us show you. Gen Z don't vote. Muslims don't vote. These people might be angry, but they don't move. It's us you need to be worried about. We are the ones with the money and we will show you we can topple you. So they toppled Jamal Bowman. Then they toppled Cory Bush. When they toppled Cory Bush, AIPAC put out a tweet in which it said, 99 races run, 99 races won. It was a message, but also a betrayal of their insecurity. They were saying that the suggestion that this anger might result in people losing their seats is an exaggerated fear. It's us you need to fear, because we Zionists, we know how to use the system to punish you. These guys are just shouting and screaming. They won't organize. You shouldn't be scared of them. And as a result, when Kamala Harris ended up winning the nomination, Kamala Harris, you can see it. Biden, at least during the genocide, and this isn't a credit to him, Biden, when he was heckled, would say, guys, both sides are dying. Both sides are hurt. Kamala Harris doesn't even say that. She told a group in Michigan, I'm speaking. But why? Because the Zionists sent a message to the Democrat Party that, listen, you might be worried that these guys will punish you, but we will punish you. Maybe they will punish you, but we will. And the Democrats ended up making a calculated gamble. And the gamble is very simple. The gamble is this. In this genocide that we support, in this genocide that Biden and Harris support, in this genocide that this administration supports, in this genocide that blew up 6-year-old Sidra's legs, in this genocide that blew off the heads of babies in Rafah, in this genocide that shot 362 bullets at Hind Rajab when she was surrounded by the corpses of her family in the car, in this genocide that killed Reem, Ruh, the spirit, the soul of my soul, 6 years old, in this genocide that has destroyed all the homes, in this genocide that has been used with American bombs, in this genocide in which Biden and Harris built a pier to allow the Israelis to embark on an operation to kill more Palestinians. In this genocide, we are going to offend one of two parties, either the Zionists or the Muslims. In this case, we need to decide who is worth offending and who should we not offend. They turned towards the Zionists and they found people of principle. They found Zionists saying that if you dare to waver in your support for this genocide, we will punish you. We will topple you as we did Jamal Bowman. We will topple you as we did Cory Bush. The Zionists don't say we will deliver an ally. They don't say we will bring somebody else instead. They said we will topple, we will punish, because the punishing message sends a message to the new winner that if you dare to betray Zionism as well, you will face the same fate as Jamal Bowman. We don't care about your policy. All we care about is punishing Jamal Bowman. So the Democrats said, do I offend the Zionists who have shown me they can punish, who showed me they could mobilize in anger, who showed me they could mobilize to protect their interests, who showed me they're willing to mobilize for a land thousands of kilometers away, because some Muslims say, why should we mobilize for something that's thousands of kilometers away, who are willing to mobilize for a land thousands of kilometers away? Do we offend these people of principle? Or do we offend the Muslims whose community leaders since December last year have been saying to us that because the other side is Trump, we won't abandon the Democrats?
These are Muslim leaders.
Many Muslim community, I won't say many, movements have emerged from the Muslim community. And you remember the uncommitted movement, which struck fear in Biden's heart when they managed to secure 100,000 votes in Michigan in the uncommitted primary campaign. But then the next day, while Biden is panicking, while the Democrats are trying to determine the extent of the anger, the uncommitted movement then published an article in Politico the next day to say to Biden, you might be worried that uncommitted means we're abandoning you. We're not. We just want to sit down with you. And Biden continued to support the genocide, believing that the more bombs he sends, because these Muslims are saying there's nowhere else to go, they will forgive him. They're not like Zionists who will punish. They will have nowhere else to go. They will forgive me. And Biden, in the following week after the uncommitted vote, in a CNN interview, he said that when the presenter asked, are you not worried that this uncommitted vote, it's 100,000, Mr. President. You only won Michigan by 154,000 votes. That 100,000 could be the tipping point between Michigan going blue or red. It could lose you Michigan. He said, no, uncommitted doesn't mean they're abandoning me. Uncommitted means they want to sit down and talk to me. Uncommitted, the meaning of it is, it's not like when Zionists say, I'm going to punish you. Uncommitted is a softer version. It's we just want to sit down with you. So the Democrats are saying that given there are prominent Muslim figures, we don't need to mention their names, who are even at this moment, as Gaza is burning, as Lebanon is burning, are still coming out and making an argument to Muslims that we need to vote Harris, that we have to vote Democrats. The Democrats are saying that it's better to offend the Muslims because they are more likely to forgive us for committing a genocide than Zionists are for stopping the genocide. Zionists will not forgive us if we stop the genocide. They will punish us. Muslims might forgive us if we continue the genocide because there's enough of them going around publicly saying that Harris, we have to support her because the other side might be worse.
So that's very clear. So it seems to me that if Harris wins, in effect, Zionism wins. That seems to be very, very clear to me.
So the conclusion of the Zionists is this. The Democrats have said that who should we offend them? The reason why the Zionists are spending so much money is because the Zionists are saying, hang on a second, this is a grassroots movement that is shifting American public opinion. This grassroots movement could convince elected representatives that Zionism is a political liability. How? If this group organizes, registers, and goes and starts toppling candidates that supported genocide, the conclusion amongst the representatives is, I lost my seat because I supported Israel.
The Gaza vote.
The Gaza vote. I lost my seat because I supported Zionism.
Right.
I lost my seat because I supported the Israelis. They gave me millions. They gave me funding. AIPAC supported me. And I still lost because this unfunded movement, this grassroots movement, these Muslims who don't normally vote came out to vote. Their allies who don't normally vote came out to vote. They came and they voted in large numbers to make sure that those who supported the genocide lose, which makes the representative, the next time they sit with AIPAC, Thomas Massie in the interview with Tucker Carlson said every representative has an AIPAC babysitter, his words, not mine. That when the AIPAC babysitter sits with them and says that beware, you should vote for Israeli interest or you're going to lose your seat. Thomas Massie said in the Tucker Carlson interview, and I don't watch Tucker Carlson, for anybody who says this guy spends his time watching Tucker Carlson, but in any case, this clip came up on TikTok and I decided to look into it further to verify it.
You do watch TikTok?
I watch TikTok, may Allah protect and preserve it. And anyway, Thomas Massie said, when Tucker Carlson asked him, why do you raise your voice against Zionism, but your colleagues do not? He said, my colleagues in private say they wish they could, but the headache that Zionism causes in their local area is not worth it. What he's saying is that the Zionists, because they can punish him in his area, he decides not to stand against Zionism. But what if Zionism now becomes a political liability, where you have a wave of incumbents, whether they're Democrat or Republican, it's irrelevant which party, where you have a wave of incumbents who are toppled, not because the other candidate is good, but because people said, I will not allow you a second term in power after you supported genocide, regardless of who comes into power. I will come out, I've never voted, but I will come out now to make sure you don't win. What ends up happening is the representatives sit with the AIPAC. The AIPAC representative says, I need you to support Israel. And the representative says, hang on a second. The guy who had my seat last year in 2024, he supported a genocide. He supported your massacre of Gaza, and he lost his seat because of it. He took the funding from you. He took thousands of dollars from you. He took all of your support and lobbying power, and he still lost to this grassroots movement. I'm sorry, I want to stay in power. I can't give you everything that you ask me. This is what the Zionists are worried about. They're not worried about who comes to power in November between Kamala and Trump. They're worried about the manner in which one of them loses. They're worried about the manner in which incumbents lose. They are convinced that Kamala and Trump will be pro-Israel, but they are worried that if Harris loses because she supported Zionism, if incumbents like Greg Landsman in Cincinnati in Ohio, or if Adam Smith in Seattle, for example, if these people lose because they supported the Zionists, then the mantra in American politics, which until now has been support Zionism, you win, that equation flips completely on its head. It now becomes support Zionism, you lose, because you provoke people into coming out and voting specifically to topple you, not to deliver a candidate to power, just simply to topple you because they're so angry at the genocide. This is what the Zionists are spending so much money on. This is why they're spending unprecedented money. The Muslim is saying there's no point. The Zionists are saying this is an existential crisis to our lobbying power. Our lobbying power rests, the Zionist says, our lobbying power rests on the belief that we are invincible. The Zionists don't challenge Rashida in her state. They don't challenge Ilhan in her state. Why? because they fear losing. Because if they lose the 100% track record. They rely on the 100% track record. This is the first time in American history that 100% track record is now under threat, precisely because the election is so tight, and precisely because, given the election is so tight, it's those Muslim populations in those swing states, plus those non-Muslims who have become pro-Palestinian because of the da'wah of the Muslims who elevated the content of the Palestinians. These people, who may only number 100,000 or less, have the ability to swing Michigan or in one way. That doesn't mean they vote Trump, even if they vote third party, and we'll probably get into that later on.
Yeah.
But this is the crux of the issue, and I finish on this point.
Yeah.
It's not about who comes to power in November. It's about how people lose in November in both the presidential and in the subsequent congressional. If the Zionists have to choose between Trump and Harris, if Harris is going to lose because she supported the Zionists will back Harris.
Right.
If an incumbent is going to lose because they supported Zionism, the Zionists will support them to protect the 100% track record. And this is why the choice between the Muslims in November, to put it quite bluntly, is not between Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, or even between the third party candidates. It's between cracking and breaking the invincibility of the Zionist lobby, or rescuing it under some false delusion that somehow it will make things better. The Zionists are panicking and scrambling and hoping that these minority groups don't move. And this is why we say, don't rescue Zionism in November. The Zionists are terrified. Their worst case scenario, and I promise this when I finish, their worst case scenario is Harris loses because she supported Zionism.
Yeah.
That incumbents lose because they supported Zionism. Because even if they give every support for Israel in the next 4 years, every representative between now and in 2 years in the congressionals will say, did you see how a sitting US president lost because she supported Zionism? Guys, we need to start talking to these other people who demonstrated a power that they can punish, a power so great that the millions of the AIPAC lobby could not prevent the punishment.
Just to echo, or at least to question that point, there is an argument that do Muslims really have that power in these swing states? I mean, Muslims on paper, I think maximum 3-4% of Muslims in, say, Michigan, and in Pennsylvania, it's around 2%. And if you go down the list, Arizona, it's only 1.5%. I mean, these are small. I mean, in comparison to, say, constituencies here in the UK, where in Bradford, you've got up to 50% of voters are Muslims. Do they really have that disproportionate impact that you say they have?
If you look at the polls, Harris 48, Trump 47. Harris 51, Trump 49.
Right.
Trump 51, Harris 49. You're talking they're only 1-3%. Right. The margin of difference is 1-3%.
Right.
The reason why this power suddenly exists is precisely because the elections are so tight.
Yeah.
And these are my words, these are Nate Silver's words. When he went through his scenarios, when he does his models, he literally says it's unpredictable. It's unclear who's going to win, because that's how much of a knife edge these elections actually are. And not only that, in 2016, the reason Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump was because a third party candidate called Jill Stein secured 1.07% of the vote. That's only 1%, which somebody might say, what's the point of 1%? But in a tightly contested election like the Trump-Hillary, like the 2016 election, it was sufficient for that 1% to be taken away from the Democrats that made Hillary Clinton lose. And she blamed Jill Stein and she blamed the Green Party for making her lose against Donald Trump. So you may be looking at the numbers and thinking, what's 1%, what's 2%, what's 3%? But it's precisely because it's tight that they have this outsized influence. And it's precisely because it's on a knife edge that we now see, when you look at these Muslim community, I don't want to say community, Muslim influencers, let's call them, or journalists, call them what you will. I won't mention any names, just out of respect for them. When they are coming out now, and you see them, and I saw you respond to a couple of them on Twitter, where they say, Muslims, you have to vote Harris. The other side is going to be worse. Ask yourself the question, what is their concern that makes them speak in a mode of panic that Muslims should go and vote Harris? It's because they themselves acknowledge that this small group of Muslim population, this 2-3%, 2%, 1.7%, 2%, call it whatever point, they believe these people are able to swing it. When Kamala Harris appoints an Egyptian American to go and win back the Muslim vote, it shows that Kamala Harris is aware that every vote counts in this election. Every single vote counts because it could be decided on a knife edge in those swing states in and of themselves. To answer your question simply, it's the fact that elections are so tight that gives a disproportionate power to the Muslims and those non-Muslims who have become pro-Palestinian.
The mayor of Hamtramck, I think it is, in Michigan, came out. He's the only Muslim mayor, I think, in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, came out in support of Donald Trump. Sami, are you calling for Muslims to vote for Donald Trump in his next election?
Put simply, no. I am aware that the debate within the Republican Party is changing. I'm aware that Tucker Carlson, who was considered by the New York Times as the most influential right-wing pundit on right-wing sentiments, I'm aware that Tucker Carlson is now saying that America shouldn't be funding the Israelis. I'm aware that Candace Owens now is almost day and night attacking the Israelis in a way that she was never doing before. I'm aware that Thomas Massie is calling on his colleagues to come out increasingly and be brave in calling out the Israelis. I'm aware that there is a change in the Republican Party that I believe Muslims should be engaging with in the spirit of da'wah. And I don't mean da'wah in the Dajjalic version, which is the spiritual. I mean da'wah in terms of conveying the message of the Muslims to the Republican parties. But I think the issue of the endorsement by this Muslim, by the American Muslim, by a Yemeni origin of Donald Trump, I think is very unique also to Yemenis. First of all, many Yemenis are bitterly upset that Biden took the Houthis off the terrorist list. I know many people are celebrating the Houthis, and you said, Sami, avoid the controversy, but it is what it is. I know many people are celebrating the Houthis of what's happening in Gaza. But talk to any Yemeni in Yemen itself, and they will tell you the reason the country is at war is because the Houthis keep marching out of Sa'da in the north, and they keep marching down towards Sana'a to take over the land because they believe only Abd al-Malik al-Houthi, or before him Badr al-Din al-Houthi, only the Houthi family have the right to rule Yemen because according to their doctrine, only Ahl al-Bayt are allowed to rule Yemen. And this is the 7th war they've embarked in Yemen. They were bitterly upset, the Yemenis, that they did a national dialogue and that the Houthis marched out of Sa'da. They bought their time during the national dialogue. And then when everybody agreed on a transitional government led by Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi, the Houthis marched and said, forget the transitional government. They allied with the former dictator Ali Abdullah Saleh, who the Yemenis had overthrown. They allied with the former dictator, toppled the transitional government and the like. Under the Trump administration, he was very hard against the Iranians. He put the Houthis on the terrorist list and he essentially bullied the Iranians. And many Yemenis who saw Iran's influence in Yemen as malign, they saw Iranian influence or support for the Houthis. Iran was the first to send an ambassador to the Houthis after they took over Sana'a. Many Yemenis believe that the Democrats betrayed them, betrayed Yemen, betrayed their country and the like. And therefore, many of them have had an affinity for the Republican Party. The second point worth noting is, and I'm not speaking on his behalf, I'm just analyzing why somebody might endorse Donald Trump in that regard. You can ask him yourself if you're going to Michigan, inshallah, maybe you might do an interview with him. In any case, the second reason is the Republicans have been doing an outreach to some of these Muslim communities privately over the past year. In contrast to the Democrats who alienated a lot of Muslims in Michigan over their stance on LGBT. So this mayor in particular was caught up in the anger when the LGBT movement wanted to force schools to teach LGBT, and a lot of the Muslim parents came out in July, the July before the genocide began in Gaza. A lot of parents came out and said, we don't want this to be taught to our kids in school. Kids don't need to be taught about it. And you'll remember Fox News did a very positive coverage of the Muslim parents who were protesting against that. He was caught up in that as well. Very upset at the imposition of the LGBT agenda. And Democrats went very hard against him in that regard. So that also alienated him in this regard. And the third point is, if you listen to his video that he did on Facebook, he describes his interaction with Donald Trump, where Donald Trump invites him to speak on the stage to endorse him. And he narrates the story. He says, Trump's team said it might upset some of the donors. It might upset some of the people who support us. And Trump said, no, it doesn't matter. Let him speak. Let him come up and speak. And he says that it gave him an indication that Trump is being influenced by the donors, not by an ideological inclination. Now, I'm not saying I believe any of that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the endorsement for Donald Trump or for the Republican Party is not as strange as it might sound, when it comes from a Yemeni or when it comes from those who see that Iran has a malign influence in the region in and of itself. There is also an article that came out that showed that Muhammad Boulos, who is a very rich, wealthy Arab, whose son, I think, is married to Tiffany Trump, has been doing the rounds in Arizona to tell people that privately Trump is saying that he doesn't have a problem with the Muslims, he's on good terms with the Emir of Qatar, good terms with the Muslim world and the like, and that they shouldn't worry, and that what he says publicly is not necessary. And there was a court case in Florida, I think he referenced, where a Republican candidate made Islamophobic comments. And when he was taken to court, he said, I was only doing it for political expediency. I don't actually believe this stuff. I'm not saying I believe any of this. What I'm saying is that this endorsement is the result of an outreach by the Republican Party that the Democrats did not do. It's the result of alienation by the LGBT community, of the Muslim community, by ramming down their agenda in a way the Democrats did not protect the Muslims from. And it's also the result of Democrats saying to the Muslims, your vote doesn't matter to me. The Muslims said, I am heartbroken over Gaza. Stop the genocide. And the Democrats said, you have nowhere to go. The other side is Donald Trump. And we will not even allow a pro-Harris Arab representative to speak on the DNC stage, even to say that, can you please take into consideration what's happening in Palestine? The Democrats were saying to the Muslims in Michigan that we know you have nowhere to go. We're not focused on you. We're focused on appeasing the Zionists. And this mayor turned around and said, given the Democrats are not listening to us, they're not paying attention to us. Republicans have done an outreach. My country, Yemen, is burning because of the Iranians, and the Democrats are trying to make a deal with the Iranians, and they're going easy on the Houthis. And I know some people might say the Americans are bombing the Houthis, but not only that. And I promise I'll finish on this point. I know I've gone on long on this. When he was asked, Amir Ghalib, I think his name is, when he was asked, but Trump will be worse. And I know you want to go to this point later on. Oh, you know, Trump is going to be worse. How dare you, etc. He made an interesting point. He said, you say that Trump is going to crack down on, quote, anti-Semitism and pro-Palestinian sentiment. What is Biden doing today on the campuses? You say that Trump is going to crack down on Palestinian voices in the media. What's New York Times and CNN doing today under Joe Biden? You say that Trump is not going to allow any voices in the White House in favor of the Muslims and the Palestinians. What voice has Biden allowed in the White House with regards to Palestine that he took seriously in any capacity whatsoever? You say that we will lose all access if Trump comes into power that the Democrats have offered us. What access did that access to the Democrats, what benefit did it give to us now that 240,000 are being slaughtered, still being slaughtered, and the Wall Street Journal reports that the conclusion of the Democrats, the conclusion of Harris is, we now believe there's no hope of a ceasefire before the elections, and we've just given up on it, and we've sent 2 aircraft carriers and troops to the Middle East to make sure that Israel is able to conduct its operation in Lebanon as it wishes. He said, when you say it's going to be worse, explain to me what Trump is going to do that Biden is not already doing. Again, I'm often accused, and I challenge anybody to find any sentence that I've said where I said, go and vote Trump. Yeah. I actually don't believe that's the best course. I believe there's an alternative course, but I'm here just to analyze. I'm not here to give my opinion on this. Yeah. But we'll come to that. But in any case, your question was, do you tell people to endorse Trump? No. Do you endorse Trump? No. Do you tell people to vote to Trump? No. But I understand why this mayor came out and supported Trump.
Right. So let's then talk about options. We have got probably two third-party candidates in Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein, and Cornel West. And they've sort of come out in favor of the Palestinian cause and very strongly against Israel. And both of them, I believe, have VPs who are Muslims. You've strongly supported the Free Syrians in Syria. And Jill Stein was caught up in this controversy when Mehdi Hassan, during the interview, took her to task on some comments made by the Green Party as an official party that seemed to be endorsing Assad. And in that interview, she looked very uncomfortable. And it seemed like that he had caught her out on a very big issue that a lot of Muslims feel quite deeply about, the impact of the Syrian civil war and how that's killed large numbers of Muslims in the country. How do you place Jill Stein? Is she imperfect? How do we think about voting for someone like that if she does apparently have this track record, which is highly problematic over Syria? Are we weighing up Syria versus Palestine?
I think that, first of all, I just want to correct. It's not the case that I supported the Free Syria Army. I supported the Syrians' right to freedom and dignity and was bitterly upset. And I felt it's very tragic at how their right to freedom was denied by the international powers that set a number of conditions and in the end said, if the Syrians don't fulfill our conditions, we'd rather the Russians come in and bomb Syria into oblivion. But in any case, it's a different point. I think that Jill Stein interview, certainly it appeared like a car crash in the way that Mehdi Hassan attacked her.
Yeah.
My only slight issue with it was, and I don't want to delve too much into intentions, is that I felt that perhaps focusing a lot on that issue in and of itself, while Biden and Harris is committing a genocide, incredibly heinous as what Assad committed, perhaps if not worse, I don't want to compare the genocides in and of itself, is a question to be asked in and of itself. But regardless, what was impressive about what Jill Stein did afterwards, and again, it's not for me to endorse anybody, is the way that when community leaders went to her and said, we're really upset about this, she issued a statement the next day in which she called Bashar al-Assad a war criminal, Putin a war criminal, and she added Bush, Obama, etc. The point is, the Democrats who aren't listening to the community over genocide, no matter how much they shout, and they're ignoring them and shutting the doors, won't allow them on stage, leave them sitting outside the DNC for 4 days in the cold and 4 nights, made them doing statements, please just give us a phone call, and they won't even give a phone call. The Democrats are shutting the door in that regard. Jill Stein has opened the door and is willing to come out and, in her words, clarify and say, this isn't the position that I took before, or it was misunderstood, or let's suppose it was her position. I accept and I'm ready to listen to this community and adapt accordingly. And that's why when you mentioned the point that both Cornel West and Jill Stein have appointed Muslim vice presidents, it showed that these parties are willing to listen. And that's the issue here, in that these parties are willing to listen because they believe there is power in the community. The Democrats are not willing to listen because they believe this community has no power, or that it has power and is not willing to use it because they have nowhere else to go. The second point that's worth noting is, when you talk about do you advocate, do you go to Jill Stein or Cornel West or the like? For me, it's not about endorsing the candidate. For me, it's this. There is another reason why the Zionists are worried, aside from the fact that the invincibility of the Zionist lobby is now under threat because of what might happen in November. The idea that somebody might lose because they supported Zionism. Yeah. The second threat, which I think comes only once in a blue moon, is that there is a very real chance that the two-party system in America could be broken in November. And I explain what I mean. Under US law, if a party gets 5% of the popular vote nationwide, they are entitled to federal funding and state funding in future subsequent races. Right. One of the reasons the Democrats sued Jill Stein in so many different states to get her off the ballot is precisely for this reason. The Democrats are concerned. They're not worried that Jill Stein will win. They're not worried Jill Stein will beat Kamala. Yeah. They're worried, one, Jill Stein might take more votes, or that Jill Stein and Cornel West will take votes away from the Democrats, because the Republicans are not going to vote for Jill Stein. They'll take votes away from the Democrats that will make the difference in their fight against Trump. But also, if Jill Stein passes the 5% threshold, then you now have a second liberal or a second Democrat party. You've now broken that two-party system. You've now created a third way. It's not about whether it's beneficial for the Muslims or not. You've broken the duopoly that exists in the United States. Right. And when you calculate, the reason why it's a very real possibility, assume the Muslims are 2%. I say 2% only because I saw an article when I went to Baltimore a few months back that said that Sheikh Omar Suleiman, they put Sheikh Omar Suleiman's picture next to Obama, Bush, and these others, not for war crimes, don't worry. Yeah. They put it as the people who have the most influence over voting tendencies. Wow. And Sheikh Omar, they put under Obama 34%, whatever. Under Sheikh Omar, they put 2%. Let's suppose Muslims are 2%. Let's suppose that a strand of them will go to the Republicans, like this mayor in Michigan. Let's suppose that a very small minority will rescue Zionism, will try to rescue Zionism by supporting Harris. That's a harsh way of putting it. But will go and vote Harris because they believe the other side is worse. Yeah. And let's suppose, therefore, that the remaining 1.2% go to Jill Stein. Let's suppose. Let's suppose that Cornel West in the last days says, you know, Jill Stein got 1% in 2016. My poll said I'm also going to get 1%. I'll withdraw so that 1% can go to Jill Stein, for example.
Yeah.
Although it's not a given they'll go to Jill Stein, they might go to the Democrats. But in any case, let's suppose they go to Jill Stein. So 1% of the Muslims are 1.2%. Plus the 1% of Cornel West, you're on 2%. Plus the 1% of Jill Stein, you're on 3%. And let's suppose there's a 2% out there, which is not far-fetched, that have become so disillusioned with the support, unwavering support of the Democrats to genocide. Because bear in mind, John Hudson in his tweet, where he says that new analysis captures the difference between the demand of the Zionist donors to the Democrats and the 13%, he says, of Democrat voters who are planning to punish Biden for genocide. In brief term, John Hudson said that the Zionist request or demand to support genocide is what might make 13% abandon Democrats.
Yeah.
Let's suppose of that 13%, that John Hudson is the one who said it, not me. Let's suppose that 13%, 2% of those, 3%, add it to that 3% that exists for Jules, and she gets over the 5%. It doesn't matter in this instance if Trump or Harris wins. All of the news will be the two-party system is broken and Harris lost because she supported the Zionists. And support for Zionism broke the two-party system. AIPAC lobby broke the two-party system unwittingly. The system that was supposed to work for them, they broke it by pushing it to its maximum limits and forcing people to come out. If Jill Stein gets past 5%, and some Cornel West supporters might say, why are you focusing on Jill Stein here? It's because in the polls in the swing states, it's Jill Stein who's way ahead of Kamala Harris. Yeah. In Michigan, I think she's 43%. Kamala Harris is on 16. Right. In Wisconsin, I think Jill Stein is like 54 or something like that. And Harris, it's because Jill Stein is way ahead in that regard.
Yeah.
But in any case, if Jill Stein gets to 5%, if those Muslims who aren't registered to vote go and register, because apparently you can register to vote until the last day of the elections. If they go and register to vote, if they register a popular vote, she doesn't need to win in the state. If they register a popular vote for Jill Stein, and those popular votes across the whole nation are counted, and she gets past 5%, she becomes a recognized party that entitles her to federal funding that allows her to seriously compete with the Democrats of the Parliament. But there's one final point, I promise on this.
Yeah.
It's not just the federal funding that suddenly gets access. At state law, if a party gets between 2 and 5%, it varies between 2 and 5% individual states. They're also able to access state funding. And this is the point. The reason why the Democrats sued Jill Stein in New Hampshire, sued Jill Stein in all these different places, is not because they thought Jill Stein will win. They are worried a third party will emerge. It's irrelevant whether that party supports the Muslims or not. What's clear is the Muslims have the ability, and the non-Muslim allies, because Muslims are only 2%, you need the other 3%. The da'wah of the Muslims and the non-Muslims who are pro-Palestinian that convinced Americans to become pro-Palestinian, collectively 5%, there is a very real potential. I don't put it at 10, 15%. There is at least a 50% chance that if the popular vote goes to Jill Stein for 5%, I'm not endorsing, I'm analyzing, that there will be a third party in America. The two-party system is broken, and the world will say that all of this was done simply because a party supported Zionism. Yeah. You break the AIPAC lobby by ensuring that Harris doesn't win.
Sami, you say you're an analyst, but there should be an endorsement there. It just seems like a slam dunk, as they would say in America. If you vote for Jill Stein, you get the ability to break the two-party system. I mean, that seems like a very appetizing prospect.
The issue is, one, الغريب يجب أن يكون أديبا. The stranger has to be respectful to the people that he's talking to. I'm an outsider to America. Yeah. When I go in...
You spend more time in America than in Britain. Don't say you're an outsider.
Fair point. You know the other podcast that we did. I think I must have said parking lot or something in passing. Yeah. Somebody commented, said, "Oh my God, he's now speaking American."
That's
in any
right.
case, it's not for me to say what the Muslims should do. I'm saying this is a route that is very really possible, but there are still a number of Muslims within the community who want to rescue the two-party system, not because of evil intent, there is a comfort associated with the two-party system. There is a comfort that is associated with it, a certainty that is associated with it, a sort of status quo that has been established. And this is not a blame in any way, where they have thrived and benefit. I mean, when you go to America, you will see it. There are comfortable homes, there are good jobs. You go to Washington, you know, they get to sit with politicians and the like, you know, they feel the access, etc. The path of breaking the two-party system requires a level of struggle, because this party, once it breaks, it needs support and backing, especially if it's broken through because of your support. That requires an engagement and a path of struggle that I am still not sure if we Muslims, at least in the West, and this is not just for the US, we saw it here in the UK as well. I don't know if we're used to that struggle that is required in terms of engagement and the like. I remember, for example, Sheikh Suhail Hanif, very, very good friend. In my opinion, one of the most genius minds of the Ummah. I know you had him here on the podcast.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think some people didn't appreciate what a genius this person actually is. And I've traveled with him as well. There are very few people who've left me mesmerized. People often say, you know, Sami, you talk a lot. This guy sat with me from 9 p.m. in Australia until Fajr. And I barely uttered a word. Like, I was so taken in by what he says, mashallah. Albeit he has a very different demeanor from me, mashallah.
This has shocked me, Sami. You didn't utter a word.
In any case, Sheikh Suhail once privately, I was talking to him about the idea of how do you get Muslims to engage? How do you convince Muslims not to engage with the system in a way that endorses it? But how do you get them to open the other eye, as I put it, and engage in da'wah that transforms societies?
Sure.
And we talked about this in another podcast, the difference between bending the system and the kind. And he said to me, you know, Sami, in some madhahib, there are things that would make, you know, the ordinary Muslim really revise some of it. I said, what do you mean? He said, for example, take zakat. He said, one of the pillars of zakat, there are some scholars who have argued that one of the pillars of zakat, the seventh pillar, can be given to anybody, zakat can be given to anybody who defends the ummah. How do you define that? And the eighth pillar is zakat can be given to somebody who is hostile to Muslims, to make them neutral while you focus on a battle that's in front of you here.
Right.
I told him, if you told me, if I went to Muslims and I told them zakat could be given to people who are saying things against the Muslims to keep them neutral, to donate to various campaigns here and there, I would be lynched, ya Sheikh.
Yeah.
He said, it's not my job to, I'm just telling you what some of the scholars have said.
Right.
The reason why I say this is that I think that although there is definitely a route to break the two-party system, it requires a level of engagement and struggle on the part of the community and the revising in terms of what is our social contract with the societies that we live. Are we a mercy to mankind in which our job is to deliver Islam? I was reading Muhammad Asad on my way in, The Road to Mecca, where he argues that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the issue that Quraysh had with Islam is not the actual theological aspect insofar as he was calling to one God. They could have easily added another God to the Kaaba. The issue was that the Prophet ﷺ was insistent on getting involved in their social issues. He was insistent on getting involved in their politics. He was insistent on pushing Islam into their politics. He was insistent on changing the behaviors of society in accordance with Islam. And Waraqa ibn Nawfal, and I never realized this until on the train here when I was walking. The uncle of Khadija radiallahu anha, when Khadija anhu says to the Prophet, says to Waraqa that this is what happened to the Prophet ﷺ, he says to Rasulullah ﷺ, oh ya Rasulullah, how I wish I would be with you on the day when your people start to oppress you. And Muhammad ﷺ says, why would my people oppress me? The status quo is good. I live comfortably in Michigan. I live comfortably in Pennsylvania. I live comfortably in these places. Why would my people start to turn against me? Why would they start? The Prophet ﷺ is asking, and Waraq ibn Nawfal says, the message that you bring is one that was brought by the prophets, and it was always met with repression. It was always met with a backlash. The third party way, once that duopoly is broken in November, by, I don't want to be ambitious, I won't say 2% Muslims. I think some Muslims will still go and rescue the Democrats and inadvertently Zionism. But I don't say Democrats, rescue Harris, because there are some seats like in Seattle where if you vote, there are two Democrat candidates running. So there's Adam Smith, a Democrat, and there is Melissa, also a Democrat. Right. Melissa is a Muslima, and Adam Smith is, I think she's American Reva. You would vote Democrat, but you would be punishing the genocide. So I won't say Democrats. Sure. But the point is that there is a road in which 1.2% Muslims, plus the 1% that Jill Stein got in 2016, plus the 1% Cornel West is expected to get, plus 2% of the 13% that John Hudson says are planning to abandon Biden, you break the two-party system. Gaza breaks the two-party system. Gaza breaks the invincibility aura of Zionism. And these are the roots that are there. This is why when we talk about, about the community, about move. The reason why you move is because when you move, you create opportunities. Because the Ummah moved, because it raised its voice, because it elevated the voice of the Palestinians, because it went and spoke to ordinary Americans about what was happening in Palestine, because they showed the images, because they showed the videos, because they amplified the voice of Mu'taz Azaiza, Hind Khudari and Plestia and all these other Palestinians, because they put it on everybody's phones, because they managed to work with the algorithm to deliver those Palestinian content, their da'wah made the heart flip. They fulfilled the ayah, فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. That Allah says, push back with that which is best. idfa billati ahsan. For the one with whom you have an enmity today, the ones we thought were pro-Israel and therefore anti-Palestine, those pro-Israel became pro-Palestine when they received the da'wah and they saw what was happening in Palestine. Because the ummah moved, because the community moved, you created an opportunity today where you can break the two-party system and break the invincibility of the Zionist lobby. The issue is, the battle is not over yet. It's not over yet. The reason the Zionists spent 24 million on Jamal Bowman is because they're reacting to that pressure. We move, they're moving. And right now there's a wrestling match. Zionism is trying to rescue its invincibility in November. Many Muslims are saying, I'm getting tired, I'm feeling fatigued. But the Muslim don't realize it's the Zionist who is panicking. It's the Zionist who feels that neither Harris or Trump can reverse the breaking of the invincibility. The Muslim is getting tired because he or she believes they're not making the impact. The Zionists truly believe this is an existential crisis because the Ummah moved. The Ummah moved. And now as we approach November, this is the crunch time. You have to keep moving. You have to keep pushing. You have to keep mobilizing. You have to keep strategizing. You have to keep planning those routes. And this is why here on this podcast, when you ask me, do you endorse? It's not about endorsing. I'm saying, listen, it's not about whether Jill Stein is the perfect candidate or not. I'm saying, what do the Zionists fear? They fear the breaking of the two-party system because Jill Stein might get 5%, because you might give her 5%, and they're worried that the invincibility of Zionism will break because Harris will lose because you abandoned her. You weren't scared about the other side. You abandoned her because you said, Wallahi, I will not forgive the slaughter of 240,000 Palestinians. That was a red line. You need to learn a lesson. And let's be honest, when the Democrats realize that they lost because of Gaza, in 2 years' time, they won't say we don't need the Muslim vote. They won't say we don't need the anti-genocide vote. They will come with a different face than that with which they supported genocide.
The lesser of the two evils argument. So the argument goes, and I was in conversation with lots of Muslims on Twitter. There was one particular sister who said that she was in a genuine dilemma when it comes to who to vote for, because of course, because of that principle of the lesser of the two evils. And if you weigh up Donald Trump versus Harris, you find that even when it comes to Palestine, Donald Trump supposedly is meant to be worse. Donald Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem unilaterally. Donald Trump turned a blind eye to West Bank settlement activities. Donald Trump has said, in speeches that he would give carte blanche to Israel to finish the job. Whereas the Democrats and Harris, they're a little bit more measured. I get the point you made earlier, but there is a little bit more of a measured tone when it comes to that type of language. But domestically as well, even if we argue that they are the same when it comes to international politics and when it comes to Palestine, domestically, the argument goes that Donald Trump would solicit a lot of pain, like he did when he came into office previously with the Muslim ban. And we know how that affected so many Muslims, and that continues to affect Muslims in all sorts of ways. So how do you tackle this less of the two evils argument when it comes to Harris and Trump?
I think that when it comes to the argument of the lesser of two evils, or that Trump will be worse, or Trump will do internationally worse than the Democrats did, I think that this argument is a very flawed one when it comes to the international side of things. Because if you look at, for example, 1973, you had the Arab-Israeli war. You had the oil embargo that took place. You had Kissinger running around, and then King Faisal assassinated in 1970s and the like. And then there is an election and a new government comes to power. Then you have the Iran-Iraq war, and then a new government comes to power in early 1990s. You have Sudan. John Garang in South Sudan is now laying siege to Juba. And then you have Sudan, which is then sanctions are imposed on Sudan. You have the Bosnian War, which starts with a Republican and ends with a Democrat president, both happy to turn a blind eye to the genocide that is taking place in Bosnia itself. Then you have a new president where you have the war on terror, in which imposes legislation against the Muslims. Then you have a Democrat president who comes after that Republican, who during the Arab Spring decides instead to support counter-revolutionary movements, support the UAE and the like. And then you have Donald Trump who comes in, who moves the embassy to Jerusalem and essentially comes in, albeit Trump perhaps saw less wars under his time than anybody else, but in any case, and then comes Biden who commits a genocide in Gaza itself. Right. When we talk about the lesser of the two evils internationally, I think that those who argue it are those who are rather not as attuned to what happens to the Middle East as much as they think they are. The reality is that you look through every decade, there is a calamity caused by a US president, regardless whether it's Democrat or Republican. The question is not whether it happens or not, it's whether you care about it or not. Do you care about what happened in Sudan in 1990s? Do you care about what happened to Bosnia in 1990s? Do you care about Iraq-Iran in 1980s? Do these issues matter? Were these issues something that you considered to be worse, or is worse measured by the standard of what affected you in terms of the war on terror, because it affected you, because Obama made you feel comfortable while continuing to destroy in the same level of magnitude as those before him came to destroy as well. So let's set that aside for starters. The second point is, I think it's important to be wary in terms of how we look at how Trump could be worse internationally. Again, I'm not endorsing Trump. I'm analyzing it politically. When Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, first of all, it wasn't Trump who came up with the law. It was already passed from way back. It's just he implemented it. Secondly, when Trump implemented it, the reason, in my opinion, the EU did not follow him or any other country did not follow him is not because they didn't want to, but because Trump's politically ugly nature made it so that these countries didn't want to be seen to be supporting what they refer to as fascism. I'm not getting involved into whether it is or not. If an African American or a black South Asian woman president moved the embassy, it would be historic. And all the other people would follow because it's historic. And she could evoke or invoke a heritage of struggle to render the violation of the Palestinian rights as historic. It would be much harder to counter that. The second point, or rather the third point, is that even when we look at it internationally, under the Biden-Harris administration, the US is supporting a roving militia in Sudan that is committing a genocide in Darfur for no other reason than US believes if Sudanese have elections, they will choose the opposite of what US wants. And therefore, it's better to support the militia of Hemeti and let him commit genocide and impose himself on Sudan. That's better than letting Sudan vote. And the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed met with Biden to discuss Sudan issues as well at the time of this recording. Under the Biden administration, they opposed the withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan that Trump instigated and Trump forced. The Democrats wanted to stay in Syria. Trump insisted that they should leave Syria. These aren't good points for Trump. I'm saying when we talk what could be worse, the argument is Trump is worse than Biden. I'm saying they are at least the same. Right. They are at least the same in that point. When you look at it domestically, first of all, the Muslim ban, and I know this because I had to go to the embassy to apply for a visa because I'd been to Sudan and therefore I couldn't use the ESTA. I had to go and apply for an interview to get the visa. The Muslim ban was an Obama legislation that Trump implemented. It was a Democrat legislation, the Muslim ban. It's a Democrat idea. The second point is, when we talk about what will happen domestically, and now I go to the words of the mayor in Michigan, Trump is going to crack down on pro-Palestinian voices. What did Biden do in Columbia University when he sent in those police to brutally beat up the students? And in Ohio, rip off the hijab of one of the state elected representatives, Monera, rip off the hijab in order to force them out of the encampments. What will Trump do that Biden hasn't done? In terms of banning TikTok in Congress, under the Biden-Harris administration, banning free speech. Biden is already doing it. So he's already surpassed Trump in that regard, or he's done at least what we expect Trump to do. Crack down on pro-Palestinian sentiment in the Congress itself. We're expecting Trump to do that. Biden is already doing it. Revocation of visas for those who are expressing pro-Palestinian sentiment, the idea of kicking immigrants out. Biden is already doing it. We're expecting Trump to do it. Biden is already doing it. In terms of what we expect Trump to do, the reality is Biden is already doing it. But Trump could be worse. What I'm saying is, it's not that Trump won't be worse or could not be worse. I'm saying is, what are you comparing it to? And even when you look at what Biden has done or what Harris has supported in Gaza, we're talking about the slaughter of 240,000 Palestinians. We're talking about limbs being collected in garbage bags and yet to be identified because they'd have no idea who they belong to. We're talking about heads being blown off in Rafah. We're talking about Sidra with her legs blown off. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people being forced to leave Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Gaza City, Northern Gaza, Gaza City, Khan Yunis, Mawasi, etc., being bombed into oblivion, craters being bombed. We're talking about Biden, who has given Israel every single weapon that it has demanded. We're talking about the Biden-Harris administration that sent a general to Jordan to coordinate Israel's attack on Lebanon and also to take down those Iranian missiles. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that built a humanitarian pier in order to facilitate Marines to go in and support the Israelis in massacring the Palestinians themselves under the auspices of releasing the hostages. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that vetoed every resolution calling for a ceasefire. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that lobbied its allies to vote against the resolution calling for the end of occupation to the Israelis. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that threatened to sanction ICC officials if they issue an arrest warrant. On the words of Karim Khan, the prosecutor himself, we're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that threatened to sanction the ICJ if they found Israel guilty of genocide. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that cut funding to UNRWA in order to try to break the backs of the Palestinians, to force them to leave Gaza so that the Israelis can annex it and take it. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that on October 20th presented a bill to Congress to ask for $14 billion to give to Sisi and to give to King Abdullah of Jordan so that they can open the borders to allow the Palestinians to enter their lands. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that asked for $14 billion to build tents to keep the Palestinians there so that Israel could annex Gaza and Netanyahu could have his victory. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that when they met with the Palestinians at the White House, when Biden was shown the picture of what's happening in Palestine, he turned his head and said, I've seen these pictures, and showed no empathy whatsoever. And people can watch the interview that the gentleman did with Omar Suleiman in which he describes it. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that when an American citizen called Aisha Noor from Seattle was shot in the head by Israeli forces, 26-year-old, Allah yarhamha, when she was killed because she decided to leave Seattle, go to the West Bank, go to support the Palestinians, to provide aid, to provide humanitarian aid, the Israelis shot her in the head. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that didn't call her family, that didn't give condolences, and that went in front of the press and said that the bullet somehow ricocheted off the floor and hit her head. Instead, the list could go on and on and on. And we're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that sent Blinken to Saudi Arabia to negotiate normalization ties while the genocide was still going on. We're talking about how much further. We're talking about Biden-Harris administration that when companies said that our ships on the Red Sea are being stopped by the Houthis, and the Houthis have said, stop the genocide in Gaza and we'll let the ships through. Biden and Harris said, let the genocide continue, we'll bomb the Houthis instead. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that when Hezbollah of Lebanon said that make a ceasefire in Gaza and we will stop sending rockets to northern Gaza that will allow the settlers to go back to stolen land that they took from the Palestinians. When Hezbollah said we'll stop as well as ceasefire, the American Biden and Harris said go and hit Hezbollah instead. You have the green light to go and hit Lebanon instead. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that when the Jordan Farm King went to Biden to tell him we need a ceasefire instead, Biden and Harris ignored him and sent him straight back to Jordan and sent him all those air miles telling him we're not going to do anything, but we expect you to help us to take down those Iranian missiles, and we expect you to make sure those Palestinians in Jordan do not cross the border into the Israel itself. We're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that when Netanyahu entered the Philadelphia corridor in order to stop the aid going into Rafah so that Netanyahu could go in and massacre those in Rafah, we're talking about a Biden-Harris administration that would hold Congress hearings in insisting that all of this is good policy and we should continue supporting the Israelis to do so. Explain to me what Trump will do that is worse. Explain to me how much further you can go than this. Explain to me how 240,000 being killed according to Lancet. Explain to me how much further Trump is going to go. 10,000, 20,000, 30, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000. We're still counting. We haven't got to 240,000 yet. People say no, but there will be normalization of ties between the Saudis and between the Israelis and the like that Trump will facilitate. Biden hasn't been resisting. Saudis had clear demands and Biden was about to give them. What ruined it was the genocide. What ruined it was Bin Salman said, I'm ready to normalize, but this genocide, I can see people, they are angry. Jalal won't stop talking about me. Dili won't stop talking about me. These other imams won't stop talking about me. And I need now my imam to make dua for Palestine because my people are seeing what's happening and they're getting angry. And I'm telling them that I won't normalize in exchange for a Palestinian state. But I need to say this because this genocide makes it PR-wise, I'm unable to normalize with you. I'll keep my airspace open to show sincerity. I'll keep the land bridge open to show sincerity. I'll continue to restrict expressions of sympathy for Gaza to show sincerity. I'll keep my 2 billion funds in Jared Kushner's asset fund that invests in Israeli company. I'll keep that to show sincerity. But you need to understand, I need theater to convince these Muslims that normalization is like the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. It's not that Biden is somehow preventing normalization. Biden wants it, but can't find the deal that he so desperately craves. So even normalization will continue. The UAE did not kick out its Israeli ambassador from Abu Dhabi. Neither did Morocco. Bahrain didn't reverse normalization either. Tell me what Trump will do that Biden has not done. And this is the point that I'm saying, in that when people say Trump is going to be worse, worse for who? Worse for the region? Every US president brings a calamity. It's always the same situation. Worse for who when you say Trump is going to be worse? And here is the damning indictment. What they mean is worse for me. They're suffering, I'm comfortable. I don't want to struggle. They're dying, you're telling me to be uncomfortable. I don't want it. They're being slaughtered, I'm used to it being over there. Don't bring it home. They're struggling, don't bring it here. I'm comfortable, I worked hard, I have a good job, I have a good role, I have a good house, I have good money. Yes, they might interfere with my citizenship. Yes, they might ban Auntie Halima from going through New York JFK airport or the like. Yes, they might do, but these things, and this is the point that I finish on. And maybe someone like this argument, but I want to put it quite bluntly. To summarize, because I could list the examples endlessly, but I want to summarize it in this point. Trump is going to be worse than Biden. Let's measure it. What do you mean relative to what happened to the Palestinians? Tell me what is so terrifying that you are willing to forgive the genocide in Gaza. Tell me what scares you so much that you are willing to step over Sidra's lifeless corpse with the legs blown off and say, excuse me, sorry. That you will step over Hind Rajab's cold corpse that was shot at 360 times by the Israelis while she sat in the car waiting for an ambulance that was blown by Israeli tank. That you step over Hind Rajab's body, sorry Hind. That you would step over Reem's body. Tell me what's so terrifying. You step over Reem. Ruh, spirit of my spirit. That you step over the child, you can't identify this child, the head's blown off. You step over them. You step over those 240,000 corpses to get to that ballot box. You step over all of them. You walk by the Palestinian refugees walking by. Where are you going? I'm going to the ballot box. Voting for who? You're too ashamed, embarrassed to say it at that time. You walk to the ballot box. You walk over those bodies, piles and piles of those bodies, drenched in the blood. You see those kids in those images of the hospitals, crushed by the rubble. Their arms are hanging, blood dripping for no other crime than some random people from the West said this land belongs to us. You will walk all over those corpses, go to the ballot box, vote for the one who did it to them, Jalal. Vote for the one who slaughtered them. Vote for the one who massacred them. Vote for the one who continued to lend every impunity to them. Vote for the one who broke the whole international order. To slaughter those children. To slaughter our brothers and sisters. To commit the most brutal genocide. You will cross all of those corpses to the ballot box. You will put a cross next to the name of Harris, the one who committed the genocide with Biden. And you will yell to those spirits and say, I did it for you. You will look at them in the eye and say, I voted this for you. You will say that I voted for the one who killed you. I voted for the one who gave the bombs to slaughter you. More bombs than Dresden. More bombs than Hiroshima. More bombs than Nagasaki. More bombs than World War II. I voted for the one who gave unfettered access to all those weapons. I voted for the one who sent the Marines to help kill you. And you will dare to look me in the eye and say you did it for Palestine. You did it for them. The nerve, the sheer arrogance of it. It's not for Palestine. It's for your comfort. It's for your status quo. It's for the luxury that you live. Trump is not going to blow up your limbs. You're not going to have a limb amputated in the next 4 years because there's no anesthesia. You survived 4 years of Trump. You could survive again. 240,000 Palestinians did not survive 4 years of Biden. You survived Trump. You survived it. You didn't have your home taken from you. It wasn't handed to Ben Shapiro. It wasn't given to Ben Walsh. The National Guard didn't ethnically cleanse California of Muslims. They didn't go to the East Coast where it's colder. None of that happened to you in the 4 years. None of that will happen to you in the next 4 years. What are you so scared of? That you will go to the ballot box and say, I'm voting for the genociders. Why would you rescue Zionism? Why would you rescue Zionism when it's buckling? Why would you restore their invincibility when it's breaking? Why would you go to the ballot box and say, Zionism, let me prove to the world that even if they support a genocide, they can still win because no one betrays Zionism? Why would you have the chance to break the two-party system, you go and rescue Zionism? Why would you have the chance to finally let people lose because they supported Zionism? Why would you go and help Zionism prove that 99 races run, 99 races won? Yeah, Ilahi. Let there be justice in the world. You will not struggle like the Palestinians. You will not suffer anything like them. Yes, CD, if you don't censorship issues with America, come to London. London is nice once you get used to the weather. But do not say you're doing it for Palestine. Don't say you're doing it for Palestine. Be honest and say you're doing it for yourself. Because you don't want to be a people of struggle. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the reason he was so successful was because he continued to persevere through the struggle. He was offered the dunya, he said, I will not give up justice. He was offered the comforts, he said, I will not give up justice. But we're telling our kids that you are not successful until you have the home and the Tesla. Even when you think about it.
Sami, it seems to me that what you're calling for is a lot of possibly temporary pain if the worst case scenario is that Trump turns out to be bad for Muslims, at least domestically. You're basically asking Muslims in America to sacrifice and to bear the pain, if there is pain. And I suspect the pain, as you've just rightly said, is insignificant compared to the pain that our brothers and sisters are going through. But nonetheless, there may be some pain. And I suppose it brings the question up, are Muslims in the West generally, because we live in comfort, relatively speaking, but Muslims in America who live in maybe extreme comfort, are Muslims in America ready to bear that pain? Are they ready to vote for their Palestinian brothers and sisters?
I think that it's less about whether they're willing to bear the pain and more a lack of belief in their power, more an incredulous disbelief that they actually have power. Muslims are raised with inferiority complex, that the Ummah was defeated, the Caliphate fell. It's a distorted form of history. They look at the caliphate falling and say, what a disaster. But they don't tell you that the British couldn't capitalize and that they were kicked out of Egypt 30 years later. They tell you the caliphate fell, it was a disaster. But they don't tell you the Italians couldn't stay in Libya, they were kicked out 40 years later. They tell you the caliphate fell, it was a disaster. They don't tell you the French couldn't capitalize, they couldn't stay, they were kicked out 30 years later. They tell you the Ummah is losing, while these colonial powers are being kicked out one by one. They tell you the Ummah is losing, the Ummah is defeated. But they don't tell you that Islam is the fastest growing religion and that the reason there is so much Islamophobia and not Hindu phobia and no Buddhist phobia is because Islam is entering the homes of people and flipping their hearts, where they are seeing the haqq and the truth, where they are finally embracing Islam. They don't tell you this because we've developed a mentality whereby somehow we're inferiority and weak. It's not about whether they're willing to bear the pain. It's about whether they're willing to move and embrace the power that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them. Think about it, Jalal. Our entire podcast. Why are these opportunities available? Why is it that Jill Stein might get 5%? Why is that opportunity suddenly there? Why is it possible that suddenly somebody, Harris, might lose because she supported Zionism? Why is it there? It's not there because of anything any of the states did. It's not there because of Erdogan. It's not there because of bin Salman. It's not there because of bin Zayed. It's not there because of the EU. It's not there because of King of Maghreb, King Mohammed al-Sadis of Maghreb. It's because the ordinary Muslim, when they moved, when they raised their voices, when they retweeted, when they shared, through the tears in the nighttime, at nighttime, when they were looking at the tragedies and the horror and elevating the voices, when they gave da'wah, not dajjalic da'wah, which is just spiritual, when they opened the other eye and called to the societies, called to the communities, when they found people like David Weiss, who went and joined them, the Jewish rabbi, who is anti-Zionism because he knows the horrors that they implement. When they went and spoke to American society, they found that Christian pastors were suddenly resonating with what they were saying. They found Candace Owens was becoming pro-Palestinian. They found Tucker Carlson was turning away from Zionism. They found that American society was shifting because of their da'wah, and they convinced an entire generation, Gen Z, they convinced an entire generation that Zionism is an apartheid project, it's a colonial project. And that's why the ADL, the Israeli lobby, said, we've lost a whole generation. Because when they heard the da'wah of the Zionism and the da'wah of the Muslims, the da'wah of Palestine, the da'wah of haqq, when they heard it, they were so moved that they are the ones lifting the banner. How many times have you gone on social media? You see non-Muslims talking about it, including Jews coming out speaking for the Palestinians. We've seen people take to the stage at the valedictorians when they give the speech at graduation, pro-Palestinian. In Muslim lands, for example, such as the UAE, you talk about Palestine at a graduation ceremony, you get deported. In Saudi Arabia, no mention of Palestine at any graduation ceremony. But in America, that's why Jared Kushner said that when I was in Saudi, I felt safer there than I do on US campuses. What he meant was, in Saudi, no one asks me about genocide. In US, they're asking me. Who's asking him? Not just Muslims, non-Muslims. Americans heard the da'wah, their hearts are flipping. Why are they flipping? Because the ummah is moving. How is the ummah moving? It's manifesting its power. What is this power? It's a power that is greater than the millions of the AIPAC lobby. It's a power that is greater than Biden and Congress. It's a power that forces Biden to try to ban TikTok. It's a power that makes Blinken make trip after trip to Tel Aviv, desperate to find some PR strategy to market genocide. It's a power that makes Netanyahu come out and say, please stop these encampments. It's a power that makes Itochu abandon its business operations in Israel. It's a power that makes AXA abandon its operations in Israel and leave. It's a power that makes Starbucks share prices drop. It's a power that makes McDonald's shut down 150 stores. It's a power that makes Yemeni cafes rise and soar. It's a power that when the ummah moves, they manifest. It's a power that in the absence of an army or wealth, it's a power that made the ICJ, that was not designed to go and bring colonial powers through the courts. It's a power that made the ICJ 14 judges to 2 drag Israel on charges of genocide. It's a power that made Karim Khan get off his chair and finally go and start procedures to try to issue an arrest warrant. It's a power that made Labour made Labour safe seats become marginal seats and made them lose the seats such as Jonathan Ashworth and the like, and make them panic, that made David Lammy come out and say, we're starting to suspend weapons to the Israelis. It's a power that made Macron call for a ceasefire. It's a power that made Belgium call for sanctions on Israel. It's a power that made Spain recognize Palestine and receive a Palestinian ambassador. It's a power that made the Irish Prime Minister in front of Biden, who loves to celebrate his Irish ancestry and says, I'm a Zionist. It's a power that made the Irish Prime Minister say to Biden that this is not Irish. We know what colonization looks like. We know what apartheid looks like, and we see it in what's happening in Gaza today. It's a power that made Joseph Borrell come out and split with his US ally and come out and say that this is horrific what's happening. EU needs to move. It's a power that is affecting elections everywhere. It's a power that is making the Australians mobilize in an unprecedented manner in a way that could topple the government that only has a one-seat majority. It's a power that has shifted social media narratives. It's a power that has made pro-Israelis become pro-Palestinian. It's a power that made people politically active. It's a power the Ummah always had, and when it moved, it manifested it. It's not a case of whether Muslims are willing to bear the pain. It's a case of whether Muslims are willing to acknowledge that power that made Mohammed bin Salman go to Sudais and tell him, go back to making dua for Palestine and go make dua against the Zionists as well, because these Muslims are realizing that I'm on the side of the Zionists. It's what made Al Arabiya start to alter some of its coverage from going to completely pro-Zionist to entertaining some Palestinian narratives. It's what made the Saudis and UAE say to the Americans, please don't use our military bases. Our people are angry at our support for the Israelis. No one threatened these rulers. It was the power of the Ummah when it mobilized. They panicked and they made these rulers adapt. The Ummah has power, the Muslim has power, not because of their numbers, not because of their resources, but because they have Allah. And Allah is the Almighty. Allah is the All-Powerful. Take one step, He takes 10. Move and Allah moves. Allah says in the Quran, وَيَزِدْكُمْ قُوَّةً إِلَىٰ قُوَّتِكُمْ. When you move with your power, Allah adds power to that power. Meaning, you don't know where the power comes from. Allah will increase it. Allah is saying, if you move, things happen. Action is part of faith. But not action in terms of limiting it just to the spiritual side of things. Action in terms of going out, talking to your neighbors, going out, campaigning, going out, telling American society there's a genocide happening. This is so wrong. You can't keep supporting the genocide. There is a different way. It doesn't have to be two parties. There are potential opportunities here that can be used and can be exploited. Gen Z, keep raising your voices, keep tweeting, keep posting and the like. We see people coming up with new ideas, such as in the tech industry. If you've seen this wordsforpeace.org, where it's an AI, he said, Sami, I realized people were struggling to eloquently rebut the Israelis. So I taught a database, all of the Palestinian history. You go onto the website, you say, I want to refute this tweet. And the AI carves the tweet. And you can change the tune if you want to academic, professional, sarcastic, and the like. And you just share it and it goes straight to your account. You have Vote for Peace done by a bunch of volunteers who came out and said, I want to make it easy. I want to make it so people put their zip code in and it tells them all the candidates who supported genocide and all the candidates against genocide, so that everybody can have easy access in terms of deciding how they're going to punish the genociders in November. You have Unity Labs, for example, that is going around putting up all these billboards to talk to the American audience. We give $3.2 billion to Israel and I can't afford healthcare. We give $3.2 billion to Israel and we have homelessness over here. We have people doing da'wah, real da'wah to a society to ask it to uphold justice, da'wah to get involved in their social affairs in a country that belongs to them, because Allah created America, Allah created the UK, Allah created this world, a land that belongs to Allah, a land in which Muslims were sent as a mercy to take people out of dhulumat ila nur. We see society in dhulumat. We don't wish for their destruction. We say to them, we have a beautiful message. We have a wonderful message in which we want you to uphold what's right, uphold what's just. And because Allah put a fitrah in every human being's heart, this fitrah is resonating. People are listening, Jalal. You see it in the comments underneath. How many comments have you seen on your podcast itself? Non-Muslims saying that I don't normally listen to these things, but I'm listening to it because of the guests that you bring. People are willing to listen. They're willing to come. How many people giving da'wah to Christian pastors, engaging in the debates and convincing people to enter Islam? How many hedonists have we seen engage in debates? And as as a result of what's happening in Gaza and Palestine, we're seeing now these people start to entertain Islam and enter Islam as well. Islam entering hearts we thought it could never enter. Islam entering corners we thought it could never enter. But why should we be surprised? Because it's Allah who carries His deen. It's Allah who preserves it. It's Allah who guarantees the victory. Allah says, "Fasbir, inna wa'dallahi haqq." Be patient. The promise of Allah is coming. But patience, not sitting down. Patience with the processes. Keep going. Keep raising your voices. Keep tweeting. Keep sharing. Keep campaigning. Keep strategizing. Keep talking to your communities. Move, ya ibadallah. Move. Move, because you're making an impact. Move, you're making the Zionists panic. Move, you're making them spend unprecedented amounts of money to silence you. Move, they are really shaking because they fear that what will happen in November will be irreversible. Move, you've brought about a shift unilaterally with the power that you thought you didn't have. Move with the powers that you have. You've already made the difference. We're in the last leg of this particular chapter. We're in the last leg of this stage. And if it is said, but Sami, what about the other side? Then consider this one Badr, or consider it whatever battle you want in the Seerah, and we will prepare for the next battle. When Trump comes to impose on your civil rights or the like, remember, Democrats are pro-Palestine in opposition, but anti-Palestine and pro-Israel in power. They will be your allies in opposition because they will need you. All those people who are pro-Israel today kicked out of power, they will come to you because they need you in the congressionals in 2 years' time. But by then you've broken the two-party system. By then you've broken Zionist invincibility. By then you've created opportunities that weren't available to our forefathers because we built on what they built and we created new opportunities, and we keep moving as vehicles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And irrespective whether we succeed or not, all success is in Allah's hand. But we strive, we struggle, we keep going, because for every moment we struggle, Allah rewards us. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَ لَهَا سَعْيَهُ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Those who strive for the sake of Allah and they believe in Allah, striving on the basis Allah will deliver the promise, then they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Allah says in the Quran, Allah says their striving is rewarded. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not see Al-Aqsa liberated. That didn't stop him. Musa alayhi salam did not see the majority of his people guided. That didn't stop him. Nuh alayhi salam did not see the majority of people of his guided. That didn't stop him. All these prophets that you read in the Quran, what is Allah saying to you? Allah is saying outcome doesn't belong to you. The struggle belongs to you. Embrace it and trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deliver. And I finish on this point, dear Jalal. The reality is that when it comes to our desire to struggle, to our purpose in terms of what we're supposed to achieve on this earth, the reality is that when we're looking at what's unfolding, what are we here to achieve? And I'm not here talking about just about Al-Jannah or the like. The reality is that there are injustices in the world that the Ummah of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah has a duty to stand against. Let's stand against it. And when you look at the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the reality is that you look at the outcome at the end of his life and analyze it geopolitically. Imagine there is a thinking Muslim at that time. And you are saying, tell me about this Muhammad bin Abdullah, this prophet of Islam. A geopolitical analyst could be forgiven for saying that his lands are far smaller than Rome. His lands are far smaller than Persia. He's united a bunch of tribes that keep fighting within each other. And it was a tribal beef between Quraysh and a son of Quraysh. There is potentially no threat here. But the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before Rome is conquered, before Persia is conquered. So why does Michael Hart, the non-Muslim historian, put Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as number one? It's because he says, although Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not own lands as large as Alexander the Great, although he didn't conquer as many lands as Genghis Khan, although he wasn't as rich as Enrico Dandolo of Venice, he did something that no one in history has been able to do. He inspired a spirit in his community that meant that even after his passing, his companions continued to carry the message, and they passed on the spirit and they carried the message, and they passed on the spirit and they carried the message until Islam reached San Francisco, until it reached Sydney, until it reached London, until it reached Argentina, until even when colonial powers would come and colonize the Muslim lands, even when they would brutalize the people, even when they would slaughter the people, even when they would commit massacres like the 1945 massacre in Stif, Kharata and Gelma, even after 132 years of colonization of Algeria, brutal occupation, even after all the social engineering projects, even after execution of imams, even after banning of Quran, even after all of these things that were designed to prevent the hijab and prevent all these Muslim practices, when these Muslims liberated themselves, they didn't say that we abandoned the ways of Islam of the past. They said no. They said, Ya Muhammad, congratulations. Oh Muhammad, oh Prophet Muhammad, oh my beloved Prophet, congratulations. Are you seeing this? We returned Algeria to you. We returned Pakistan to you. We returned Bangladesh to you. We returned Egypt to you. We returned these Muslim lands to you. Ya Rasulullah, we never met you, but we never forgot you. We never met you, but we adore you. We never met you, but we still love you. And this is the point that I finish on. There is an interview with a Turkish boy talking to a presenter. And the Turkish presenter says to the Turkish boy, he's 13. And he says to him, if you were to, what is your greatest dream? And the boy says, my dream is to meet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We're talking about struggle here. The presenter says, that's a fascinating aspiration. What would you say to him if you met our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And the kid stunned me. The kid doesn't say, I'll ask him, what was it like in Quraysh? What was it like in Medina? What was it like in Badr or Uhud? He says, I would not ask him, my beloved, anything. And the presenter says, what do you mean? He says, what would I need to ask him? I would thank him. What do you mean you would thank him? I would tell him, Ya Rasulullah. We're talking about struggle. Ya Rasulullah, Jazakallah khair. That when they persecuted for raising the da'wah, when they persecuted you for raising the da'wah, you kept going. When your Sahaba were being beaten up, you kept going. When they stoned you in Taif, you kept going. You didn't give up. When they would throw organs on top of you when you were next to the Kaaba and try to humiliate you, you kept going. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab wa tab. When Abu Lahab would lay the pins on your path, and you would think, why every day am I being persecuted like this? Not he would think, but somebody would say, you kept going, Ya Rasulullah. You didn't say, no, this isn't for me. There needs to be a wiser way how to think. Ya Rasulullah, when you saw your Sahaba being tortured and you couldn't do anything for them, you could have given up the message to spare them, you kept going. They told you to keep going. When Khadija radiallahu anha died during the boycott, you kept going. When you were terrified when you came down from Hira, you kept going. When they beat you up, you kept going. When your tooth was hurt during Uhud, you kept going. When you were kicked out of Mecca and you looked out into Mecca and you said, Wallahi, you are the dearest land to me, and if your people had not driven me from you, I would never have left you. In that heartbreak, you still left Mecca. You didn't give up the message. You kept going, Ya Rasulullah. When 1,000 came against your 300 in Medina, when they came to you in Badr, you didn't cow. You went out, Ya Rasulullah. You fought in order to ensure that this message would reach me, Ya Rasulullah. When you were defeated in Uhud and your uncle was mutilated and you cried and wept at what happened to your uncle and your heart was broken and you saw what happened to your companions, Ya Rasulullah, you didn't let that despair get to you. You got up and you kept going to deliver this message to me, Ya Rasulullah. When you were digging an existential crisis in Khandaq, when all the tribes came against you, when people said there's no escape for you, when Banu Qurayza betrayed you in Medina, when you were digging and Munafiqun said to you, look at him, he's talking about the powers of Persia while all of the Arab tribes are against him. You kept that hope alive. You told the Ummah, move. You told them, keep going. The promise of Allah is true. You kept the message alive. You set aside the comforts of this world. You gave it up, Ya Rasulullah, for no other reason than you wanted to deliver this message to me. When Hudaybiyah came and your companion said, why the humiliation, Ya Rasulullah? Why can't we go to Mecca? Ya Rasulullah, when Suhail ibn Amr looked at you and mockingly said, if we believed you were the messenger of Allah, we would not have resisted you. Remove this nonsense of Rasulullah that is written on this paper. And Abi Talib is angry. I will not remove it. I will not remove it. Ya Rasulullah, you swallowed it. You put up with it for the sake of delivering the message, Ya Rasulullah. And when you entered Mecca, Ya Rasulullah, you magnificent prophet, my beloved prophet, my prophet of magnificent character, Khayrul Khalq, the best of creation. When you entered Mecca, you set aside revenge. You set aside what they did to you. You set aside the persecution because for you it was about delivering the message. And Ya Rasulullah, you weren't alive to see it. But Amr ibn al-As, who fought you, took Islam to Egypt, and every Egyptian became Muslim because of it. Khalid ibn al-Walid, who delivered the defeat that broke your heart in Uhud, he became Muslim, Ya Rasulullah, because you forgave them. He carried Islam to Syria and Iraq, and it would then spread, Ya Rasulullah, to eventually reach me. Because you set aside the dunya, the revenge, the comforts, because you chose to struggle, Ya Rasulullah, because you embraced it, you persevered, you were patient. What did you do it for, Ya Rasulullah? Not just for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although Allah commanded it. You did it, Ya Rasulullah, because you loved me before you saw me. You loved me though you didn't meet me. You loved me though you would never see the fruits of what you achieved in terms of the grand conquest of Constantinople or the like. But Ya Rasulullah, the fact you would not see the outcome did not stop you. Truly you are magnificent. I am Muslim today because when they told you the system is too strong, you kept going. I am Muslim today because when they told you you're powerless and useless, you kept going. I am Muslim today because when they told you what's the point, everything is stacked against us, you said, Inna ma'ya Rabbi sayahdeen. Allah is with me, He will guide me. Ya Rasulullah, because of that perseverance that you showed in that struggle, that perseverance that my generation was still debating whether to show it, because Ya Rasulullah, because you compromised on the comforts of this dunya and chose Jannah instead for our sake. Jazakallah khair, Ya Rasulullah. Jazakallah khair that you struggled. Jazakallah khair that you persevered. I'm here in Jannah because of that. Wa barakallahu feek.
Jazakallah khair, Sami. In your answer there, you mentioned non-Muslims who watch the show, and I'm surprised, actually, I shouldn't be, at just how many non-Muslims are very engaged with the show. I mean, a good friend of mine, he takes notes when he watches the show. He's a non-Muslim. He takes notes and he really appreciates the level of depth that exists in the program. I received this email from a lady, Alicia Stubbs from the United States, and she said the following: I enjoy listening to your podcast whenever I find them on YouTube. Most of the little I know about Islam comes from you. Alhamdulillah, that's really, really great. She then turns to the politics. Rather than focusing on turning voters to Trump, so I think she'll be happy with today's program, why not discuss the merits of supporting Jill Stein and the Green Party? A third party would add valuable voice to America's political dialogue and show citizens that there are possibilities beyond the very limited neoliberal policies offered by the two major parties. I think she'll be very happy to hear your voice. She ends her email, it's a long email, but ends her email by saying, keep up your good work of being a Muslim and being a Middle Eastern voice to the Western public. I mean, I think that's a really lovely email. We are getting through, and there are non-Muslims who, through the politics, through Gaza, through our stance and your stance and the stance of our guests on justice, that it's resonating with them. I mean, it's a really great place to be. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I always argue. Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, La ikrah fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. And many people interpret this verse as to you your way, to me mine. Almost like lakum dinikum waliya din. But I think there's a different meaning to this verse. La ikrah fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. It means Allah has placed an obligation on the Muslim that when you are trying to convince somebody of the legitimacy of Islam, justice, righteousness, Allah has said, I will not accept somebody who you put a gun to his head and told him to bow. You must convince that person wholeheartedly with their heart to embrace it. This is why the Muslims are masters of dialogue. It's why they insist on dialogue. Because their Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has said, I will not accept somebody forced into submission. That's why the Muslim, like the thinking Muslim and these others, they spend so much time curating arguments. I want to talk to you, I value you. And not because I believe I am better than you. It's because a message has come to me in which the promise of those who accept this message is they go to Jannah. I don't want to go there by myself. I want you to come. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Islam as a mercy to mankind. It's like when somebody buys you something really nice, like a nice jacket. Send me that jacket is nice. It's really good. You know what? It's on sale on this thing. You should get it as well. You know what? I'll get it for you. We've seen that between friends. Love for your brother what you love for yourself. It's this, I have something lovely. I'm not here to conquer you. I'm not here to subjugate you. I'm here because I have a lovely message that I want you to hear. I want you to be better. I'm not asking you to be beneath me. And the proof is all those who entered Islam. Look at the UK. There was an interesting picture by Cat Stevens, Yusuf Islam. He did put a picture of him, Paul Williams, and Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad. And he said, this is an image many people don't see of Muslims. Paul Keeler, sorry. It's an image that they see of all the Muslims there to show how far Islam spread, how people embrace it. Yeah. But when you look at that picture, You see nothing inferior in them whatsoever. These are giants of Islam. These are giants within the Muslim community, irrespective of ethnicity, because Allah has created a system. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The one who is elevated Islam is the one who is closest in piety, one who is close in consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why I argue Islam thrives in freedom. The reason there is so much repression of Islam in a way that's not seen with Hinduism and Buddhism is because Islam in a free dialogue, in a free debate wins. Muslims don't need violence to spread the deen. The only ones who need the violence are the ones who are terrified that if Islam reaches their audiences, their hearts will flip. And that's what we've seen with Gaza. When people saw the reality was happening in Palestine, their fitrah resonated. It's why Megan Rice became Muslim. Her TikTok was phenomenal. When the Gaza genocide started, she did a TikTok where she said, guys, I want to understand where these Muslims get their resilience from. She saw power in them. When she opened the Quran, she did a TikTok live in which she would go through the Quran. 2 weeks later, she pops up with a hijab and says, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Who forced her? No one. The Palestinians were the ones being bombarded. But Islam is a message of truth that resonates with a heart that seeks truth. And that's why the Muslim always celebrates the dialogue. And that's why when people say, people are talking about wars and violence and this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I hope this sister opens the Quran. I hope she sees Allah's message to mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala delivered the Quran to communicate directly with His servant. The beauty of Islam is there is no intercessor. You don't need a medium between you and Allah. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. If my servant asks about me, tell them I am near and I hear them when they call to me. Allah says, call on me directly. The book of the Quran, the reason the Muslims consider it a miracle is because it's a direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Imam Shafi'i, who's a famous Imam, says that the Quran can get jealous. That if you neglect it for a day, it leaves you for a week. You neglect it for a week, it leaves you for a month. The Quran is jealous because it feels it has so much good in it. It wants to help you. It wants to benefit you. Not in terms of just saving you to go to Jannah, but in the system of life that it offers. A system that says this, even a smile can be charity. A system that says that striving is rewarded even if the outcome is not achieved. A system that tells you that no one truly believes until they love for their brother what they love for themselves. A system that tells you that regardless of ethnicity or regardless of your dislike for anyone, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Do not let your hatred of a people or their hatred of you lead you to injustice. Be just regardless of what it is. It leads you to a system where Ali bin Abi Talib is in a courtroom with a Jewish resident of Medina, and the judge rules in favor of the Jewish resident. And Ali bin Abi Talib scowls at the judge, and the judge says, Ya Abul Hassan, are you upset with my judgment that I ruled in favor of a Jewish citizen? And Ali bin Abi Talib says, no, I'm not upset at that. I'm upset that you honored me with my kunya. You called me Abul Hassan, which is an elevated title, but you didn't afford the same elevated title for the other side. And this is not justice as far as I can see. It's when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala an says, Wallahi lo ta'atharat baghla, if a donkey hurts itself on the road, I will be asked on it Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's the system that it offers. And this is why Muslims, when people say, why are Muslims so going out trying to spread the message? It's not because Muslims believe in subjugation. It's because Allah has given something so beautiful. Muslims want to share it. And the ones who respond with violence are the ones who are so terrified that if they allow freedom of speech, if they allow the freedom of dialogue, if they allow the freedom of debate, they will find it's Islam that stands while every other ideology falls.
Sami Hamdi, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much for your time today. Please remember to subscribe to our social media and YouTube channels and head over to our website thinkingmuslim.com to sign up to my weekly newsletter. Jazakallah khair.